This is the most heavily guarded prison in Mexico. It has tall mesh fences and huge watchtowers. This area is a no-fly zone. This prison is considered to be unescapable. But today someone will escape. This someone happens to be the world's most powerful drug lord. He won't use any violence nor will he climb over the fence. All he will do is walk into his shower and disappear. This is the story of how El Chapo became one of the most successful drug dealers in the history of mankind. How he was hunted by authorities for decades and how he escaped them over and over again. And it's the story of how one interview with a Hollywood actor finally brought him down. But the big question, after years of controlling authorities and bossing around, is he still the boss in the prison?
Today, Mexican authorities released a new video of the capture of the drug kingpin known as El Chapo. He was caught Friday, 6 months after escaping from prison.
Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Lora, known to the world as El Chapo, was born on April 4, 1957, in the remote mountain village of La Tuna, deep in Mexico's Sierra Madre. Chapo came from a poor background, where the dreams of becoming doctors or astronauts were replaced with the grim reality of survival. Where he came from, becoming a drug trafficker wasn't rebellion, it was tradition. People would come to call him El Chapo because of his height. This man never grew taller than 1.67 meters. Chapo dropped out of school early. He didn't even finishing elementary education. And from that age, he worked in the marijuana and opium poppy fields, following in the footsteps of his father. Chapo was extremely ambitious, and from young age he learned that power came not through education or law, but through force, fear, and money, the very tools he would later master. He made friends with some big names in the local drug ring and was determined to rise through the ranks of Mexican organized crime. He first became known as a problem solver. Whenever a drug shipment missed schedule, El Chapo would eliminate whoever was responsible. His uncompromising attitude made him trustworthy, and he eventually grew close to the kingpin of the Guadalajara cartel. And when the boss was arrested, El Chapo kept the business running, eventually setting up his own organization with other traffickers, the Sinaloa cartel. Chapo organized planes, trucks, and rail cars to deliver cocaine and heroin into many countries, including the United States. He even built border-crossing tunnels, a skill that would become crucial years later. In those early years, this incident put El Chapo on the map. Juan Jesus Posadas, the Archbishop of Guadalajara and a cardinal, one of the highest ranks in the church, was a popular man. He advocated for the poor and publicly condemned the drug trade. On the day of his death, Posadas was heading to the airport to meet a Vatican ambassador. At the same time, El Chapo and his bodyguards arrived in the airport parking lot, on their way to a flight to the beach resort town of Puerto Vallarta, one of his favorite places to party. To this day, what happened in that parking lot that day is unclear. But one thing is certain, the cardinal did not survive. The official version is that the Arellano Felix brothers, who ran a drug operation out of Tijuana, were at war with El Chapo's cartel over territory. Somehow, they learned that El Chapo would be at the airport that day. One of the brothers and a group of gunmen rushed there to ambush him. When they spotted El Chapo and his men, they stepped out of their cars and opened fire. El Chapo and his men ran toward the terminal, taking cover behind cars as bullets rained down. Somehow, they escaped unharmed. The failed assassination left 7 people dead, among them, was Cardinal Posadas. Authorities reported that the cardinal was simply caught in the crossfire, wrong time, wrong place. But there were doubts. Forensic experts later said it was likely the gunman killed the cardinal deliberately. He was shot 14 times at close range. Later, officials claimed the gunman mistook the car the cardinal was in, for one that El Chapo regularly used. But the cardinal was wearing his robe when he was shot, he looked nothing like a drug lord. If he was killed at close range, how could they have mistaken him for El Chapo? I guess we'll never know. But years later, Posada's successor made a serious accusation, that the murder was a crime of the state. He believed the police carried out the killing for the Mexican government. Posadas had previously accused government officials of having ties to the cartels. To this day, what truly happened at Guadalajara Airport in 1993 remains a mystery. After the airport shootout, the Mexican government placed a bounty on El Chapo. It took just 2 weeks to find and arrest him. He denied responsibility for the cardinal's death, insisting he had been the target. Ultimately, authorities believed him. He wasn't charged with homicide, only drug trafficking. He was sentenced to 20 years in a Mexican prison. But even behind bars, El Chapo continued to run the Sinaloa cartel. Through his lawyers, he passed orders to his closest allies. He didn't need to be in the room to pull strings. His empire ran on whispered instructions and tightly coordinated moves. Sometimes, real power is remote. In 2001, El Chapo had enough of life in prison, especially after the Mexican Supreme Court approved a law making it easier to extradite criminals like him to the US. It was time to get out. The official version of his escape was dramatic. He allegedly bribed a guard, climbed into a laundry cart, and was pushed out of the cell and through the hallways, all the way to the prison parking lot. El Chapo then jumped into a car trunk, and the guard drove him out through an unguarded gate. After a quick search, the car was waved through. Nobody checked the trunk. But again, that's just the official story. Many don't buy it. One of the questions pointed out that the prison's checkpoints were equipped with heat and motion sensors capable of detecting even a rat. The alarms would have gone off. This led many to believe El Chapo may have simply walked out, dressed in a police uniform, escorted by other corrupt officers. Either way, systemic corruption likely played a major role, and El Chapo put his newly won freedom to good use. And what happened next was a dramatic shift in the Mexican cartel landscape. A year after his prison escape, the leader of the Tijuana cartel is killed in a shootout with police. He's one of the brothers who had supposedly tried to assassinate El Chapo at the airport. In 2003, the leader of the Gulf cartel was arrested. 2 major cartels were then without leadership. El Chapo saw an opportunity. He pushed into Tijuana and Gulf territory, triggering brutal fighting. Nuevo Laredo, an area along the US-Mexican border, practically turns into a war zone. Former forces of the Mexican army begin working for El Chapo. They clash with what's left of the Gulf cartel, whose core fighters were partly trained by the US. Early on, the violence results in more than 1,000 deaths, many of them civilians, and that was only the beginning. In 2006, Felipe Calderón became Mexico's new president. Determined to crack down on organized crime, he declared war on the cartels and deployed the military. The violence escalated dramatically. Between 2007 and 2014, over 160,000 people died in the course of the war on drugs in Mexico. During these years of bloodshed, El Chapo rose to prominence. He became the world's most wanted criminal, transforming the Sinaloa cartel into one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history. It became the top supplier of drugs, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, to the United States. El Chapo's cartel operated in 50 countries and generated billions of dollars in profits each year. In turn, El Chapo amassed extreme wealth, eventually making Forbes' list of the world's billionaires. No wonder it was so difficult to keep him locked up. El Chapo's wife, sons, and one of his closest partners were instrumental in what came next. After an extensive manhunt, El Chapo was captured and brought to Altiplano maximum security prison. But behind, Chapo's wife, sons, and his partner started working on a plan to get him out. They began by acquiring an old property 1 kilometer from the prison. Then they bought an old warehouse nearby, where they stored weapons and an armored pickup truck. Finally, they hired workers for one very specific job, digging a sophisticated tunnel. But they face one major problem. El Chapo's rescue commando needed to know the exact location of his prison cell. And for that, a GPS watch was smuggled into El Chapo's prison cell, cleverly disguised as a food. With this device, workers outside the prison knew the precise direction in which to dig. Over the course of a year, they constructed a tunnel, a meticulously planned feat of engineering that cost approximately $5 million. The tunnel stretched half a kilometer long and stood 1.7 meters high, supported by a sturdy wooden frame. It was equipped with lights and a ventilation system to ensure safety and operability. Managing the massive amount of excavated dirt posed another challenge, which the team solved by creating a rail system. They modified a motorcycle to travel along this rail and haul dirt out of the tunnel, a setup that doubled as an escape vehicle. The scale of this operation was astonishing. But before all this, one question remained: how did El Chapo end up in El Altiplano prison in the first place? Was it just the manhunt? Andrew Hogan, an agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, was determined to bring down the most powerful drug lord on Earth, perhaps in history. However, he quickly discovered that there was no task force, no team, not even a single federal agent assigned to capture El Chapo. Undeterred, Hogan took a Spanish class and prepared to move to Mexico. Meanwhile, one of his US-based colleagues managed to obtain the pin to El Chapo's BlackBerry through someone in his inner circle. Tracking the phone led them to the holiday resort of Cabo San Lucas. Excited, the colleague contacted Hogan, and they shared the information with Mexican authorities. The DEA and Mexican police rushed to the location, but El Chapo was nowhere to be found. Soon after, they narrowed the signal to one of 3 mansions near Cabo San Lucas. This time, he was there. But just before the forces arrived, El Chapo escaped through the back door, reached an airstrip without detection, and flew to safety. He always seemed a step ahead, constantly switching SIM cards and phones to stay out of reach. One DEA agent even joked that the Mexicans couldn't catch him if he were standing at the Starbucks across from the embassy. Still, Hogan didn't give up. In May 2012, he relocated to Mexico City with his family and took over the Sinaloa case. Over the following months, he and his team began intercepting members of El Chapo's inner circle. Piece by piece, they unraveled the cartel's intricate communication system, how often phone numbers changed, possible code names, and GPS locations. A clearer picture began to form. One day, El Chapo arranged to meet a subordinate and sent a chauffeur to pick him up. Hogan tracked the chauffeur's phone, which led them to a cluster of 5 houses in Culiacan. Hogan organized a massive raid with dozens of Mexican Marines, helicopters, and trucks, joining the operation himself. They surrounded the property and stormed inside, only to find El Chapo gone once more. In his place was a bathtub concealing a tunnel that led into the sewers of Culiacan. This time, however, the Marines stayed close on his trail. 3 days later, they learned El Chapo had been driven to a hotel in the coastal city of Mazatlan. The Marines raided the hotel's 4th floor, stormed room 401, and headed straight to the bedroom. El Chapo was there with his family. He barricaded himself in the bathroom with an assault rifle while his wife pleaded for the safety of their daughters. Shortly afterward, El Chapo surrendered. They had finally captured him. With the most wanted man on the planet now in custody, Andrew Hogan's mission was complete. Concerned for the safety of his family, he boarded a plane back to the U.S. Meanwhile, El Chapo was transferred to El Altiplano prison. The U.S. pressed hard for his extradition, a move that would likely mark the end of his reign. The rescue team and workers successfully located the exact spot of El Chapo's prison cell shower. They constructed a 10-meter vertical shaft connecting the tunnel to the cell, complete with a ladder. All this digging and drilling created considerable noise, prompting complaints from other inmates, but the guards ignored them. The team managed to complete the $5 million tunnel directly into his cell without interference. All that remained was breaking through the floor. On the day of the escape, El Chapo sat on his bed under close surveillance. The security camera also recorded audio. Besides a loud television, banging noises could be heard, likely from the tunnel breakthrough. El Chapo began pacing his cell, then approached the shower stall, returned to his bed, removed his shoes, and moments later, walked behind the shower wall and simply vanished. He squeezed through a 50 by 50 centimeters hole in the ground, descended a 10-meter ladder into the tunnel where someone, likely his wife's brother, was waiting on a motorcycle modified for the tunnel rails. Together, they rode 1.5 kilometers to the exit point. They emerged through a shaft in an unfinished house surrounded by construction materials. An ATV was parked outside, they drove it to a warehouse, switched to an SUV, and after a 2-hour drive, arrived at an airstrip where a plane awaited. They boarded and flew to Sinaloa. 2 months later, one of El Chapo's sons tweeted a photo, presumably with his father, tagged Costa Rica. This raised suspicions. Video footage revealed that guards watched as El Chapo vanished but waited 20 minutes before checking his cell, and several more before investigating the hole. Inmates had complained about the drilling, making it unlikely the tunnel construction had gone unnoticed. Many Mexicans believed the escape was an inside job. Soon after, the prison's warden and 2 officials were fired, 4 others were charged, including Secret Service members and guards accused of delaying the alarm. El Chapo was once again one of the world's most wanted criminals. Pressure to recapture him intensified. Seeking more fame, he agreed to participate in a movie about his life. Actor Sean Penn and Mexican actress Kate Del Castillo arranged a meeting with him. In a Rolling Stone article, Penn revealed the tunnel engineers had even received 3 months of special training in Germany to manage the low water table beneath the prison. During the interview, Penn reflected on El Chapo's unerringly certain demeanor, pondering whether it stemmed from power, clarity, or soullessness. Authorities were monitoring Penn and Castillo, which brought them closer to El Chapo. On October 9, 2015, Mexican special forces closed in on him in the Sinaloa mountains. They spotted him with 1 bodyguard but lost them after El Chapo fell off a cliff and was carried into the forest. Despite the setback, authorities kept pursuing. In January 2016, they traced him to Los Mochis via a taco order from a white van driven by one of his men. Surveillance led them to a safe house. A gunfight erupted during the raid. The Marines advanced to the 2nd floor and roof, but El Chapo had escaped once again through a hidden tunnel. He and his gunmen surfaced from a drainage tunnel near a Walmart, hijacked a car, but it broke down after a few blocks. They stole another vehicle and fled down the highway, but by then, it was too late. Police captured him. When arrested, El Chapo warned officers, "You are all going to die," claiming 40 assassins were coming. Nevertheless, he was handed over to the Marines. After a decade of eluding capture, often aided by systemic corruption, El Chapo had finally been caught. The Mexican president tweeted, "Mission accomplished. We have him." El Chapo was extradited to the U.S., the one outcome he reportedly feared. On July 17, 2019, 3 years after his second escape, he was sentenced to life in Colorado's Supermax prison, where he remains to this day. Despite his incarceration, the Sinaloa cartel and other Mexican cartels continue operating as powerful global organizations. This story may seem over, but the big question remains, after years of controlling authorities and bossing around. Is he still the boss in Colorado's Supermax prison? Inside the most secure prison in America, this prison is made to break the will of even the most feared man on earth. El Chapo is confined 23 hours a day in solitary isolation. His cell measures just 7 by 12 feet, with thick concrete walls and a small, bulletproof window that allows in only a sliver of light. His bed, desk, and stool are all made of poured concrete. The only connection to the outside world is a black and white TV that streams pre-approved content, never live. And a steel slot in the door through which food is passed. In contrast to his days as a cartel boss, where he commanded men with a whisper, partied in luxury, and escaped with ease, Guzman is now stripped of all power. His conversations are monitored, his letters are censored, and even his lawyers are watched. Since his extradition to the U.S. and life sentence without parole in 2019, he has not felt grass under his feet or sunlight on his face. The closest thing he has to human interaction is the occasional, tightly controlled legal visit. His treatment is so severe that his lawyers have claimed it violates international human rights standards. Guzman himself once described his isolation as psychological torture, alleging he is denied sleep, visitation, and basic medical care. But prison officials argue that such extreme measures are justified. After all, this is a man who escaped prison twice. Once by bribing guards and vanishing in a laundry cart, and later by vanishing through a mile-long tunnel dug directly into his cell shower. His history of violence, manipulation, and corruption means even the smallest privilege could be a security risk. No longer a shadowy figure orchestrating power from behind bars, El Chapo is now a man forgotten behind concrete and steel. His empire may still live on, scattered among cartel lieutenants and rival factions. But he, the legend, is now just inmate number 89914-053. He once ruled the drug world. Now, he rules nothing, not even the hour he sees the sun. Thanks for watching.